Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a lesson on how to use the unit circle. Okay, so it's actually not so bad to use. Once you have a unit circle that you're comfortable with, I recommend going to Google, maybe downloading this one to your right hand of your screen. Okay, so the first thing that you do need to know is this was built using triangles. So you see these points. Okay. All right, so these are XY coordinates on a circle with a radius of 1. Okay, and these coordinates mean something. So the X and the Y are equivalent to cosine of the angle, which we'll call theta, and then sine theta. Okay, now if you're ever asked to find tangent of theta is going to be sine over cosine, or more simply, y over x. Okay, so this thing can be used forwards and backwards. So if you are asked to find sine of 135 degrees, all you have to do is find 135 degrees on your unit circle. Since it's sine, we use the y value. So your answer is square root 2 over 2. All right, what if you're asked to find cosine of 270? So you find 270 on your unit circle. Cosine is the first one, so it's 0. All right, let's try a tangent. So let's say you're asked to find tangent of 330 degrees. So you would find 330 degrees on your unit circle. You would put the y value over the x value. You would invert and multiply. And you get negative 1 over radical 3. Okay, so let's talk about something called rationalizing. Okay, most math textbooks do not consider this answer complete because you are dividing by a radical. Okay, that is considered to not be polite. So what they do is they rewrite it by multiplying by a fancy form of 1, which is just radical 3 over 3. So our final answer would be negative radical 3 over the square root of 9. Simplify that a little bit more, and you get the square root of 3 over 3. Okay, let me fix that a bit. Okay, now you will run into places where tangent of your angle is undefined. Now, what you'll notice is that all of the problems I just did were in degree measure. Okay, so you can do the exact same thing using radian measure. So if you wanted to find, let's say, cosine of 7 pi over 6, you would simply find 7 pi over 6 on your unit circle. Cosine's the first one, radical 3 over 2, and that's negative, and that's it. Okay, now let's talk about values that are not directly on the unit circle. So let's say you were asked to find the sine of 780. Okay, so 780 degrees is over 360. So what we would do is we would undo that rotation. So instead of going counterclockwise, okay, 2 and some times, what we would do is then we would start going backwards until we got to a location that's in the same spot, but the angle's on the unit circle. And we do that by subtracting 360. So this is called finding a coterminal angle. Okay, so you would just subtract 360 until you got a number that was on the unit circle. So let's do it one time. I get 420 degrees. Okay, that's still not on the unit circle, so I have to do it again. All right, so now I'm 60. So it turns out that the sine of 780 is equal to the sine of 60 degrees, which is radical 3 over 2. Now, the same thing works for negatives, okay? So let's say you were asked to find cosine of negative 150. Okay, so that's not on the unit circle. So what you would do is you would find your coterminal angle to negative 150 by adding 360. So negative 150 plus 360. Let's see what that is. Oh, that's 210. 210. So cosine of 210 would be negative radical 3 over 2. And you can confirm that by looking at your unit circle. Okay, now the cool thing about the unit circle is this thing also works backwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a second unit circle. Okay, so the unit circle can also be used for inverses. Okay, now this is really helpful because we'll discuss this in another video. If you use your calculator, it's only going to give you one output. Since we will discover this in a couple weeks, the graphs of the sine, cosine, and tangent are what they call periodic. We actually have in instances where we want to look at multiple outputs, but the calculator won't let us. So if I wanted to find sine inverse of positive 1/2, okay, so that actually happens, and we'll just say all values from 0 degrees to 360 degrees to make it a little easier. Okay, so if I looked at that and I wanted to look where sine gave me a 1/2, what I would do is I would say, oh, well, that happens at 30 degrees, and that also happens at 150 degrees. Okay. If I go down into the third and the fourth quadrant, I notice that the sign value is -1/2, so I don't want those. If you pop this into a calculator, the calculator will only tell you 30 degrees. It won't tell you about the 150. Okay, so let's try another one. Let's do cosine inverse is negative radical 2 over 2 for all values 360. Okay, so we're going to look for a negative radical 2 over 2 on my unit circle. Okay, so it doesn't happen at 45 degrees because it's positive, but it does happen at 135. Okay, and it looks like it also happens at 225. Okay, so those would be my answers. All right, so if I type that into my calculator though, it will only give me, let's see, I forgot what it was going to give me. It's only going to give me the 135. It won't give me the 225 because a calculator can only give you one output. It can't give you multiple outputs, okay? So hopefully this helped you use the unit circle. If we need to use it a little bit more, we can. Remember, you can have a unit circle out during quizzes and tests and exams and all of that fun stuff. Eventually, though, what's going to happen is you probably will end up memorizing it by default, okay? All right, hopefully this was helpful.